6:06, Nationals Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. And good morning to you. Hope you are doing well. I always enjoy all my guests. But at 8:05, I'm really looking forward to speaking again to Dustin Kittle. He is an attorney and a farmer here in Tennessee. And he was one of the original whistleblowers when he saw that China, they were buying up all of that farmland and specifically farmland around military bases. And so he's going to join us coming up at 8:05 here in a couple of hours. So if you've got to go into work, do whatever you need to do, tune back in at 8:05 for Dustin Kittle. Really looking forward to his perspective on this. 7:05, Brian Wilson is going to join us. And later on this hour, Jonathan Fahey and the battle over ICE, deportations, and the attempted murder of law enforcement. I mean, I got to tell you that the more we see the Democrats, it feels like, and I don't want to go off on hyperbole, but it really feels like Democrats in the aiding and abetting of these absolute criminals. Did you know, Joan, we're talking about how yesterday one of the 10 that tried to take out the ICE facility and shoot a bunch of officers in Texas, there were those 10. Not one, but two of them are trans. I don't know if you heard that. It is the craziest thing. And so we've got the latest on that story and a whole lot more here on Super Talk. Big news out of Indiana. And I will get to the story about Kamala Harris and The View coming up. Big news, though, out of Indiana. I want to make sure we get this. 2 illegal aliens accused of, listen to this, murder and strangulation have been caught finally. Because you see, back in 2023, the sanctuary state of Maryland decided not to enforce an ICE detainer, and they just let these guys go. One particular guy decided to just let him go. And so he was on the run. I mean, if this happened in 2023, dude was on the run for 2 years. And these guys were accused of murder and strangulation. And they finally, after they were released by the sanctuary state of Maryland, they were able to find them. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement and Federal Bureau of Investigation agents detained Honduran national and alleged MS-13 gang member Johnny Handy Martinez Barrios. According to a statement from ICE posted on X Tuesday, Martinez Barrios had previously been charged with first-degree murder and possession of a firearm, and they just let him go. By the way, when they stopped this guy in Indiana, another illegal alien was also in the car, Danilo Emilsar Escobar, who was deported 3 times since April of 2024, had pending charges for strangulation, domestic battery, and cocaine possession, according to ICE. Yet it's ICE who are the bad guys. That's the amazing thing. It's ICE who are the bad guys. So now ICE is saying, and the Department of Homeland Security, et cetera, they're saying we're going to keep them both off the streets until justice is served, which will likely include one-way tickets back to Honduras. So again, these are the bad guys that ICE is getting off the streets. Meantime, the left is essentially calling for open season on ICE. The men and women getting these guys off of the streets. Now, in the last several days, we've seen attacks on ICE, and these attacks do continue. I mean, just to review very briefly, Portland, Oregon, an ICE facility attacked time and again. On July 4th, you had those 10 people, including 2 trans activists, attempting to murder ICE agents. You go anywhere on the internet this morning, I should post it, but go anywhere this morning, you'll see the vast array of mugshots of these people, and they all look like a bunch of freaks. Then earlier this week, another person shot dead by agents after he charged and attacked ICE officers. And again, that was in Texas. So one of the headlines this morning, attacks are up almost 700% on ICE. Attacks are up almost 700%. Insanity. And the crazy thing is, of course, is the left, they refuse to condemn it.
I have to say a lot of this has to do with the left-wing propaganda, the stuff you hear from Democratic leaders, some of the mainstream media, all they're saying, talking bad about immigration enforcement. It shouldn't happen. And the media, the Democratic leadership that are anti-immigration enforcement need to tone it down, or unfortunately some of these things are going to continue because you got people that are just falling into this propaganda, wanting to make martyrs of themselves.
Yeah, that is a guy named Chris Clem, who is a former Border Patrol chief. He was on Fox News, and he's obviously correct. He's obviously right. The left and the media, they are doing all they can to demonize not the dude that was busted for strangulation and murder. No. They're going to demonize ICE. And that inspires these kinds of attacks.
Why don't they see the need to cross political lines and protect officers?
That's a hard question to answer because I can't understand the ideology and the thinking of somebody that way. These are federal lawmakers, or at least Jeffries is. And then you have Karen Bass, a former congresswoman, now a mayor of a major city, that is not looking at integrity and accountability of enforcing the law and upholding the law. Yep. So it's like they've dug their trenches and they're staying with it. They have, the American people spoke on this last election.
Yeah.
They are for immigration enforcement. Cooperation will save lives and bring the integrity back to the system.
I mean, listen, remember the story that we had yesterday with LA Mayor Karen Bass, right? Where she actually went to MacArthur Park in Los Angeles and demanded that ICE leave as they were looking for gang members like the guys that I just mentioned from Honduras.
Comment is they need to leave, and they need to leave right now.
I mean, stunning, just absolutely stunning. We're talking about this rumor, this story that was reported by Charlie Kirk, where he said that he was hearing that the Trump administration is considering, or at least Donald Trump is being pressured to have some sort of a mass amnesty. Can you imagine if that is ultimately what happens? I don't believe that Donald Trump will do that, but you'd never know with some of the people that are in Washington, D.C. Hopefully Donald Trump listens to his constituents. But this is what's going on. And with Karen Bass, remember where this segment started, with the capture of these two guys, gang members who were wanted on violent crime and murder charges. And she is telling ICE to leave. And this is going on, every day, day in and day out, in sanctuary cities and sanctuary states all across the country. Then you have the story from this morning. A guy in New York who has been arrested for posting this about ICE agents. You ready? He said, and this is posted on social media, "I can't wait to put a bullet into his brain. But first, his children." Guy's name is Matthew White. He is 43 years old. He also made other threatening comments, including responding to a video of border czar Tom Homan by saying, well, then understand, if your ICE agents don't show proof of identity and a signed warrant, we will kill them. Guy's threatening, because he's talking about ICE agents in masks. The guy's literally threatening to kill ICE agents. He also allegedly posted, "Kill them all. ICE is the new age Gestapo. Stop them." White is charged with communicating interstate threats. He made his first appearance in federal court last week and has been released from custody with conditions. He's been released from custody with conditions. Really? See, to me, that's a guy that needs to be in prison. That's a guy that needs to be held because he is clearly not of sound mind. I mean, you're posting this on the socials. And so Tom Homan had quite the response to this kind of thing. I've got that great audio coming up. It is 6:15. Time to check the roads on WTN. Weather today, high of 90, scattered thunderstorms as well. Appreciate you listening to Nashville's Morning News. So I just told you the story of this guy, Matthew White, who thought that it would be a good idea to threaten ICE agents on the socials. So, of course, word gets around to Tom Homan. He says, look, we're not going to be bullied.
The rhetoric against the men and women of ICE is skyrocketing, especially by members of Congress. We have senators, we have Congress people that compare ICE to the Nazis, compare ICE to racists, and it just continues. So the public thinks, well, if a member of Congress can attack ICE, why can't we? So the rhetoric has to stop.
Yeah, the rhetoric does have to stop. And you have all of these various blue cities like Portland and Chicago and, of course, Los Angeles, threatening Tom Homan, threatening ICE as well, saying, don't come here, don't come to our towns, even though ICE is picking up people wanted for murder, strangulation, all those kinds of things. They're putting criminals over law enforcement.
I'm going out there. They're not going to bully us or you know, we're going to do the job. We're going to do it in Portland too. But for the mayor of New York City and Chicago, President Trump made it clear 2 weeks ago. We're going to double down and triple down on sanctuary cities. Yes. Why? Not because they're blue, because we know they're recent public safety threats to the streets every day.
Every day. Every single day. Democratic lawmakers saying Monday that their constituents are encouraging violent acts against immigration agents, with some even suggesting they should be willing to get shot to grab media attention. Now, I don't know, Joan, I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but have you heard any Democrats anywhere trying to tamp down that rhetoric? I have not seen anyone say that at all. And so it is interesting. I wonder how many of those Democrats are telling their supporters to not do that. Now, Mark Wayne Mullins, he is, of course, a senator.
The most damning thing about this is this absolutely silence from the Democrat Party. If this was any other time, you'd have every Democrat out there saying that we need gun control, and that'd be the first place they ran to. Now they're not saying a word about it. At the same time, President Trump is trying to install law and order back in these blue states, in these blue cities where these criminals are running rampant, and this is a criminal attack.
He's absolutely right. Again, you had in that text, people are saying it was Antifa, right? People are saying trans-Tifa. I think that's what it is, where 2 of those 10 were trans. But you did have that Texas attack, and people are saying that was Antifa. And all of this is basically brought to you by the Democrats. And again, remember the story from Axios earlier this week that I just referenced about how the base of the Democrat Party, they want blood. They want violence. They say not enough is being done to stop Donald Trump. So if they want blood, I hate to say it, but if they want blood, they're going to get blood. And one of their own has already been shot and killed by ICE agents earlier this week. So this is going to get worse, it seems, before it gets better. And as the Democrats have not been calling for the violence to stop, as a matter of fact, it does seem to me that their silence does speak volumes. It is 6:19 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. More on this and a lot more from Jonathan Fahey coming up at 6:35 here on Nashville's Morning News. All right, there's a new book on the failed campaign of Kamala Harris because, you know, it clearly was one bad decision after another. And there's some new light being shed on this now infamous moment on The View.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
So remember, that was a big moment in the campaign. A new book out actually is now claiming that Kamala Harris's aides, they were backstage, and they realized how bad that was. They realized that Kamala Harris made a huge mistake and actually begged Kamala Harris and The View hosts to redo that question so that Kamala Harris could redo that answer, which, of course, never happened.
She gives that answer, and our book reports her aides backstage, head in their hands. They try to get the host to actually do the question again to hopefully revise her answer, which she never does. So.
Yeah, that's a guy named Josh Dawsey. He was on MSNBC. Dawsey, Washington Post reporter Isaac Arsdorf, and New York Times reporter Tyler Pager's new book, 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost America. That was released yesterday. The new book explains that Kamala Harris aide Stephanie Cutter asked 2 of the co-hosts to try asking Harris the question again. This is how they describe it. Backstage on The View set in Manhattan, Rob Flaherty, a deputy campaign manager, put his head into his hands and swore During the next commercial break, Stephanie Cutter went to co-host Whoopi Goldberg and Ana Navarro to ask them to try the question again. But Harris didn't get that second chance. After the interview, Harris knew that she had messed up and asked how big the problem was, the authors wrote. An advisor said her answer on the liberal ABC talk show was the defining error of the campaign, the authors reported. Harris, and by the way, this is what's interesting. Harris did not give the answer that she was prepared to give with her aides. They had rehearsed. They had come up with, the perfect 20, 25, 30-second soundbite for her to give because she knew that this question, no doubt, was going to come. Apparently, she just completely decided that she was not going to give that answer, which, if she had done it the way that she had rehearsed, she would have praised Joe Biden and emphasized that she did not want to look back and critique the administration. The prepared answer also acknowledged that she was her own person. Her aides also encouraged her to mention that she planned to appoint a Republican to her cabinet, which the former vice president did mention towards the end of the interview. So that is also part of the news cycle today. Unbelievable. And the fact that they wanted a do-over in the middle of the show, and that she didn't get one, by the way, actually speaks volumes. I think that even the people working with Kamala Harris at the time knew how fatal that error was. It is 6:23 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7. Joan Jones has the news at 6:30. Joan. 6:37, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. As far as your weather today goes, high of 90, scattered thunderstorms as well. Appreciate you listening. So, Joan, earlier, I had made mention that I had given Bandit some cheese.
Yes.
I am always astonished at how perceptive our listeners are. Sally sends me this note, and she says, well, Dan, you said you gave Bandit some cheese, and he is fine. Is this the same Bandit you said doesn't like cheese anymore because you kept putting drugs in it?
That's right. You did say that.
So he didn't freak out over thunderstorms and fireworks?
Yeah.
Which is it, Dan?
Yeah, Dan.
So, honest to goodness, it's the orange cheese that we would put the pills in. He won't take the orange cheese anymore. However, I did give him some string cheese, which is not orange. It's white, and it's a completely different shape.
I didn't know that dogs could see colors. I always thought they couldn't see colors. Maybe it's the scent.
It could be the scent. It could be the fact that it's a different shape because string cheese is like a pencil. It's like long. It's not. What shape is whatever? Jonathan Fahey is joining us. What shape is string cheese? I don't even know. What is it? Like long and round? It's like a pencil shape. Jonathan Fahey, you're a lot smarter than me. What shape is string cheese?
Yeah, it's long and round.
Cylindrical.
And I think it would be the smell that would probably trigger it, possibly smelling the medicine within the cheese would be my thought.
There you go. Jonathan Fahey, excellent attorney as always.
Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. All right. Now, anyway, that's the story about Bandit and the cheese. Let's talk about a number of different things, Jonathan. Of course, waking up this morning and yesterday afternoon, we heard that there is now an investigation into John Brennan and James Comey. And they're now apparently under some sort of a criminal investigation regarding their part in the beginnings of the Trump-Russia probe. Now, you and I both know, you were there in the Trump administration first go-round. And so this is about the dirty dossier and the origins of the dirty dossier, of course, paid for by the Clinton campaign. Ultimately, it makes its way into the FBI. It makes its way into the media. It leads to the Mueller investigation. I don't want to go through all of the details here, all of the nooks and crannies, because it's very complicated. But I think this is a good thing because they might actually be held accountable now for, in my opinion, setting up the first Trump administration.
Yeah, if you really look at that first administration, in so many ways, it was derailed by this investigation, right? Because you look at the first 6 months of the Trump 47 term and all that's been they've been getting done. And the first term, they had to spend so much time dealing with this, dealing with investigations and things like that. So it is a big deal, and it's worth getting to the bottom of it. It is kind of, there wasn't that much information on it, but it does seem to be, I guess the issue was with John Brennan, that they're saying he testified one way in Congress about not wanting to include the Steele dossier in like an intelligent assessment, but then there's documentation indicating the otherwise, I guess is what they have. So that seems to be, could be problematic from him if it's that clear cut. But one thing that's really important with criminal investigations, most criminal investigations federally or criminal charges have a statute of limitations of 5 years. So if he had lied to Congress in 2020, or I think that was the year, we may be at the point or have passed the point where a viable prosecution can occur. There could be also a conspiracy associated with that and other types of things that might, sort of make that longer. But that's one thing that I think might not derail them finding out what happened, but derail them being able to bring charges. And the Comey thing, it wasn't as clear, at least from the articles I read, but I assume it's the same type of thing as the Steele dossier that was provided by the Clinton campaign, which is probably one of the dirtiest political moves I can ever think of, and it hasn't gotten its fair attention. But that was included in multiple FISA warrants, and I think the question is, were they aware, and was Director Comey aware that this was provided by the Clinton campaign? And I think that's an interesting question, because I don't think that information was provided to any of the judges that were signing off on the warrants. And that's kind of a big deal, because they've since acknowledged that the Steele dossier, without it, they don't believe they could have obtained these warrants. So it seems like a relevant fact to put in there. But a lot of that part of it I'm kind of speculating on, but that's what makes sense, is where his and the FBI's involvement touches into this thing.
Well, and everybody knew that the dirty dossier, once you read into it, the accusations, the rather seedy accusations about the hotel room and Trump and, all those kinds of things, over time, we began to realize that it was so completely BS. And of course, then the Mueller investigation ends up the way that it ended up, which is, essentially clearing Donald Trump. But I think that James Comey, this is a guy, and of course we all remember a few weeks ago, 86-47 on the beach. Everybody remembers that conversation. But I think I'm so cynical. I'm just going to tell you, Jonathan Fahey, I'm so cynical that anything is going to come of this, because it seems to me like nothing ever really does come of these things, these investigations into the evildoers in the swamp.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair prediction on a lot of these things. And a lot of these things, I think the problem is they start off with so much fanfare, and then if they sort of peter out or don't result in some massive, uncovering of some massive conspiracy or something else, everyone was disappointed. And I do think in some respects it's sort of like on the front end, maybe there may not be that much more there than we already know, right? That Yep. It's, with John Brennan and some of these other people, it may just be, we know what we know from the Durham report and other stuff, which is a lot of, sloppy work, a lot of things that, questionable motivations, but don't amount to necessarily criminal activity. And that's at least a possibility that's on the table, that has to be on the table. And one thing I expect that Donald Trump knows, and the administration knows, how the justice system was politicized against them. So I don't think they're going to, if it's not something that is a clear-cut, strong case, they're not going to charge people just for political reasons. I really believe that, because part of it, because they didn't do it even before he was investigated. They weren't doing it under the first Trump term, but also he knows how bad that was, not just for him, but for the country.
Is there a possibility? I'm gonna ask you this question, then I'll get your answer on the other side. Is there a possibility that there might be some news management going on here? Y'all, what's going on with the Epstein files. There's no Epstein client list, and yes, he did commit suicide, and the base is really angry. All of a sudden, here we are with this investigation into James Comey and John Brennan. I'm just wondering if there's a bit of, distraction game being played. Maybe, maybe not. I'm just spitballing on that. It is 6:45. Time to check the roads on WTN. As far as your weather goes, it looks like it's going to be hot and sticky again today with the high around 90, scattered thunderstorms as well. The feels like temperature probably going to be up towards 100 degrees. Thanks for listening. All right, so Jonathan Fahey, you think there might be some news management going on here? It's like, well, there's no Epstein client list, and he really did commit suicide, even though we've all been talking about this for years. But we're going to go after James Comey and John Brennan.
Yeah, I think there's some, like on the surface, there's a coincidental factor, but I do think, just to take the non-cynical view for a second, I do think they were going to do a deeper dive into some of the Russiagate stuff anyway. Yeah. Whether or not it got announced at this time, who knows? But it is a standard Washington move. It's typically the Democrats pull it off. It's the Friday night news dump, and they know the media will give it a surface, just very minimal coverage on like a Friday, and then let it die over the weekend, and it never gets heard of again. And fortunately, like for the Democrats, they get away with it because the media is complicit in all of that stuff. But it is, a lot of these things, you could certainly piece them together. But also with Donald Trump world, there's always news. It's not like the Biden world where really there wasn't any news. There'd be days and days where he didn't do literally anything, and we almost had to not make up news, but just talk about stuff around the edges because there was nothing really going on there. And Donald, President Trump, there's literally like 3 or 4 big news events every single week. We just had Netanyahu here. We have these things that are like would ordinarily be like massive news stories, and they really are. They get like a day of traction, and then there's the next news story. So, I think people could see it this way, and I think that the Epstein thing, the same type of thing. People get so excited about it, and it gets ginned up in the news, and they sometimes you need to recognize the possibility maybe there isn't anything there, or the other alternative is like if you release names of people, if you're DOJ, there's probably a lot of liability issues on their end because there's a lot of putting people in certain lights if their name just happens to be associated with something, and that might be a consideration when you're releasing things like that. Because when I was a prosecutor, the only names you typically release are charged defendants, and you wouldn't release names of witnesses and things like that in ordinary course of handling a case.
All right, so we've got 2 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about illegal immigration. I know that you saw the performance of Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass earlier this week.
Comment is they need to leave, and they need to leave right now.
That is, of course, Karen Bass, not talking about MS-13 that have infiltrated MacArthur Park in Los Angeles. She's talking about the ICE agents that were there to get MS-13 and these other various gang members and so forth. So give me your... there's a lot going on with illegal immigration. We have what happened in Los Angeles. We also have in Indiana a couple of, bad guys, gang members that were busted here in the last 24 hours. They were wanted for, charges related to murder, strangulation, these kinds of things. Yet, again, the Democrats, their narrative is that it's ICE. They are the ones that are breaking the law. They are the bad guys, not the bad guys they're trying to arrest.
It's so shameful when you think about it. And, Karen Bass, it's just, there's so much you can say about her, but it's just pathetic. And it's also, there is the biggest reveal has gone on in the last few months about the Democratic Party because, again, we've talked about it before, but the last campaign, Democrats were talking about how they were in favor of border security. We know that is 100. We knew that at the time, but I think almost everyone now knows they are for full-on open borders, full-on amnesty, because they fight every single deportation. Nobody said a peep about the border security Donald Trump's achieved in the first 6 months. So we know what they're about. These are the people they will call ICE agents Nazis and other things. But if you were to call an illegal alien, they would go apoplectic. You have to use their, whatever the preferred euphemism. Remember the word that non-citizen that Mayorkas would always use, which was
visitors.
Yeah, all that stuff. But it's fair game to call an ICE agent a Nazi. It's just beyond preposterous. But yeah, they don't care. They put MS-13 members ahead of the citizens of the United States and our law enforcement officers. They fight every single deportation as hard as they can to make it harder, and also it elevates them within the Democratic Party. Because look at Los Angeles, it's a disaster. California is a disaster objectively. They haven't built, I don't think they've been rebuilding any of the houses that were burned down 6 months ago, but yet this is the type of thing they spend their time on. It's truly astonishing, but it actually helps her because it's a big distraction from her incompetence. Just fight ICE. You're a hero in the Democratic Party, and you can be an utterly incompetent mayor as she is, or Gavin Newsom that's really driven that state into the ground, but he's a hero in the Democratic Party for, quote unquote, standing up to President Trump, whatever that means. Hardly takes courage in the Democratic Party. Just oppose everething he does, and they act like that's somehow impressive.
What an easy gig that is. All right, I've only got like a minute
it's
left.
So easy. Yeah,
I only got a minute left.
So
Charlie Kirk had made mention that there is the possibility that President Trump is being pressured into some sort of a, I'm gonna air quote this, mass amnesty. I don't know what that means. I mean, I think I know what it means, but I don't know if that pertains to this case. I think what he is talking about is what was referenced, and you and I spoke about a few weeks ago, where the farmers and also the hospitality industries need, some illegal aliens apparently to work for them, and so they're talking about maybe giving them amnesty. What have you heard? What do you think about that? I've only got 60 seconds.
I think there will be no amnesty given. I think, President Trump, I mean, he's always open to ideas, and you see that with everything. But I think, the move is for any of these industries is figure out a way to, if we need guest workers, to have guest workers, not to reward the people that came here illegally. But the trick with guest workers or anything else, we've got to do something with birthright citizenships. Because if you come over here to do a job and then have a kid, all of a sudden the kid becomes a citizen, and for all intents and purposes, a lot of times the parents do. So I would be shocked. I know there are people that push for it, but the amnesty is not going to happen.
No, it seems to me they could just fix the visa system, get all these folks on visas and get them up to date, and then there you have it. They're here on visas, and that's what needs to be fixed ultimately.
And they have to leave when they're over. Yeah,
that's exactly right. All right, Jonathan, real quick, how can people find you on X?
John for Fairfax, JONFORFAIRFAX.
All right. Appreciate it. And by the way, if you follow me on X, you can also find Jonathan there. We follow each other. It is 6:53, and Joe Jones has the news coming up at 7.